Keystone College. Nestled in the forested rolling hills of northeast Pennsylvania, Keystone was founded in 1868 as an academy, a type of privately owned school that prepared students for entry into college. Classes opened in the basement of the First Baptist Church of Factoryville with 17 students, 11 of which were women. The majority of the Board of Trustees was required to be part of the Baptist congregation. All denominations of students were welcome at the school, but attending services on Sunday was mandatory. Women were allowed to attend Keystone from its beginning, still a notably progressive decision for the late 1800s. In 1874, construction on Keystone's first building was completed, the main hall. Located on the highest point of the campus, the main hall accommodated 200 students and included classrooms, study rooms, and a chapel. Main Hall would later be renamed Harris Hall in honor of Keystone's influential first principal. Dr. John Howard Harris was a young Civil War veteran from the Pittsburgh area who had just graduated from the University of Lewisburg with a Bachelor of Arts degree. He was a strict disciplinarian, but his passion for learning was infectious, and he instilled the love of knowledge in his students. Harris believed in close teacher-student relationships and would take time to speak one-on-one with struggling students. He would give kind words of sympathy and encouragement, and his guidance and compassion led to the graduation of many young men and women who might otherwise have been dismissed. Since the late 1800s, Keystone has supported a wide range of sports and athletic programs. One student who benefited from this was a local Factoryville teenager named Christie Mathewson. Graduating from Keystone in 1898, Christie would go on to become one of the greatest major league pitchers in history. Beyond his skill on the field, his off-field charisma would change the very perception of baseball. The game's image as a gambling sport played by rough men shifted when Christie brought a level of sophistication that the nation latched onto. He was tall, handsome, and one of the few players with a college education. One sports writer remarked, "He talks like a Harvard graduate, looks like an actor, acts like a businessman, and impresses you as an all-around gentleman."
One of the first inductees into the Hall of Fame, born and raised in this area, Christie Mathewson was probably the pioneer of what we try to do. I mean, it's more than just baseball players. I mean, Christie Mathewson was, he was in the Army. He was, he wrote children's books. He did a lot of stuff for the community, and that's what we try to do with our players. Go beyond baseball, and give back. And baseball is a small part of their life. It's always going to be a small part. And I always say, when it's all said and done, our goal is to make sure that we produce good husbands and fathers and brothers and good coaches somewhere down the road. And I think that's what Christie Mathewson was.
By the start of the 20th century, women began participating in sports as well, beginning with women's tennis and basketball. Football, baseball, and basketball were popular with the boys. As the years passed, more sports would be added to both the women's and the men's programs.
In the early 70s, I'm going to say it was around 1971. I could be wrong. And a young lady came to me with Marge Philbin, who was the director of women's physical education, and said they would like to start a field hockey team. I was the AD at the time. And I said, well, do you have enough women to participate? They said, yeah, we do. And I said, well, let's have at it. So we started a varsity field hockey team, and from there, our women's program has expanded to the point where there are multiple opportunities for women in intercollegiate athletics at the present time.
During his tenure, Dr. Mike Mold would lay the foundations of many new athletic programs that would touch the lives of students for years to come.
Doc Mold was the athletic director here and the baseball coach for a long time. And he's been a mentor to not only me, to a lot of people on this campus.
Kind, compassionate man that is an invaluable resource, not just for athletics, this institution. It's been almost like a father figure and a brother, and that's to a lot of people here too. I'm just lucky to call him a friend.
In the early 1800s, the South Fork of the Tunkhannock Creek was dammed to form a substantial lake named Nokomis. The lake was used by Keystone students from its earliest days for boating, swimming, fishing, and ice skating during winter months. A dock and a diving board were located behind the present Miller Library, and a wooden bridge crossed to the far side for access to the bustling Northern Electric trolley station. In the late 1940s, the deteriorating dam was demolished, and the lake finally receded back into the current path of the Nokomis Creek. The Great Depression of the 1930s found Keystone Academy in dire straits. Enrollment was down due to the growing public high school system, cut even further by the nation's financial situation. Teachers began to leave to find jobs elsewhere, and faced with the shell of a school on the verge of collapse, the Board of Trustees had to take action. In July of 1934, the Keystone Board voted to transition to a 2-year college, ending the Keystone Academy after 66 years and severing all denominational ties to the Baptist Church. In its place, the Scranton Keystone Junior College opened its doors, with Dr. Byron Hollinshead as its first president. In its first semester, the college had 120 students on its rolls, 6 times more than in its last year as the Academy. The name would later be changed simply to Keystone Junior College. The 1940s and 50s were a busy time for Keystone. During the war, the college was used by the government as a training center for the Nurse Cadet Corps. The post-war years saw heavy enrollment as returning GIs used their government college funds to get their degrees. Brooks Gym was acquired from the Glenn L. Martin Company, a famous aircraft manufacturer. The all-wood building was disassembled, the pieces numbered, and shipped from Martin's Baltimore plant to Keystone, where it was reassembled. The 1960s was a period of great unrest. A series of assassinations and the Vietnam War had the nation on edge, especially on college campuses.
The Vietnam era. Kids were tough. They were turned off by that war, and rightfully so. And they were angry.
We were students here. The draft was in effect at that time. You had friends that some were coming back from Vietnam, some were going. So it was a very tumultuous time in this country.
I think there was like this whole social thing swirling around us at the time. There's a lot of political unrest, a lot of social unrest.
The mantra was, don't trust anybody over 30. And you know what? They tried not to trust us, but they did. They did. Damn it, we got to them.
The faculty were a moderating influence on all of that, and Keystone was kind of a sanctuary for a lot of people. It was a beginning, or re-beginning, if you will.
Despite the troubles, Keystone flourished and expanded under President Harry Miller.
Excellence in everything that we did, right down to the detail, was important to Harry. He was a scholar. He had vision. He put a great deal of emphasis on the person, be it a student, a staff member, or a faculty member. He cared about everybody.
He called me at one time. He said, Bill Turstig has an order here for a certain amount of canvas. Now, he doesn't teach painting. What's going on? So I said, well, he uses the canvas on top plaster to knead the clay to take the moisture out of it. And silence the other end. He says, okay. He hangs up.
A new and larger library was built in 1968, named in honor of President Miller. Students and faculty stood outside on a wintry day to form chains and transferred every book by hand from the old library into the new. Overseeing this entire operation was head librarian Mary Van Noort, herself a graduate from Keystone in 1936. Mary proudly oversaw 3 different libraries during her time and retired in 1981 after giving 41 years of her life to Keystone.
What came out at this juncture came down the line, went into the new library, went into this place, and we emptied the old library in one day.
In 1965, President Harry Miller hired a young teacher named Carl Neuroth, who went on to lay the groundwork for Keystone's extensive art program. Carl was soon joined by Cliff Prokop and Bill Terstig, and under the leadership of these three men, the art program would become recognized nationwide for its excellence.
We moved into what used to be the old student center, which is the art center now. It's top of the hill. I was on the right-hand side, and Carl was on the left-hand side teaching drawing, and Cliff was in the back with the sculpture.
My wife, Scotty, died in '91, but she was an art graduate as well, and she would run the office from the inside, doing all of that work that kept the thing afloat, the logistics, a lot of the counseling, all kinds of things of that nature, which allowed me, in addition to my teaching, to go out and visit all of these schools on a yearly basis. So it was a kind of a 4-team effort, really.
That has been a substantial part of the reputation of Keystone. It's an area that Keystone has a wide-ranging expertise in, and has, over the years, produced people like Diane Paparo, who's got her own firm in New York now.
They were after a person to build a new sculpture building, which was kind of unheard of, a little campus this size. And it was a perfect fit for me because I just had all these wild ideas.
Then Cliff took over the design of the sculpture studio and made it much more significant than I had plans to make it, because, he was, he had high hopes, apple pie in the sky hopes, anyway.
He came right in at the right time. He knows how to build all the equipment. He built iron furnaces. He did all kinds of crazy stuff that you never think would happen on an undergraduate level.
Carl was clearly the boss, and was a great manager. He was a person who looked at the details in everything. And Bill Terstig was a little bit fatherly and was a gentle, kind soul. And Cliff Prokop scared the hell out of me.
When Ward came, he was a local guy. I was from out of the area, obviously. Bill was from out of the area. Carl was from out of the area. But he was a local guy from an institution that we were competitive with. And here we were hiring one of their graduates, which I had some problems with. But, he turned out great.
In 1971, Thomas Kupolari, professor of astronomy and physical sciences, responded to a magazine advertisement selling a historic Alvin Clark refracting telescope. The telescope, built in 1882, was being sold by Dave Garroway, original 1951 host of The Today Show.
So I wrote a letter to Dave Garroway saying that I saw that there was this Alvin Clark 9.5-inch F-15 telescope for sale, along with a 16-foot dome. And I was inquiring that we would be interested in this, and what price was he asking for it? He wanted $5,900 for the whole thing. The dome at the time that he bought it was $5,500. So I went to see Dr. Miller and pointed out what this thing was. It's a very fine telescope. And he said, "Do you have a plan of what you want to do with it here?" And I said, "Yeah. Want to re-erect the thing, want to use it for the astronomy classes, we'll use it for the physics classes. But equally important, I wanted to begin a series of public programs with lectures and observing sessions." And when he looked at the price of it, he said, "If you can get Mr. Garroway to sell it to us, we'll buy it." When it came to Dave wanting to know what we would do with it, I laid out this plan. And he said, "It's yours." If Dave Garraway had wanted a lot of money for it, chances are it wouldn't have happened. But he had a specific goal in mind that it would be used to help teach the public about astronomy. So we stepped into it, and we're still doing it.
1972 marked the start of Keystone's involvement with environmental conservation, led by biology professor Howard Jennings.
Well, back at that time, if you recall, the late 60s, early 70s was sort of the birth of environmental consciousness. Keystone partnered with the National Park Service. The faculty members that were instrumental in developing that were Mr. Howard Jennings and Dr. Michael Mold. So they were the directors of a new program that was known at that time as the Youth Conservation Corps. We would go out, build nature trails, do stream work on the streams out in that area, and engage in a lot of other environmental projects, again in conjunction with the Park Service.
He developed the Nokomis program, and the kids would come and take courses for credit and would work the afternoon on the campus.
To me, Howard was the epitome of Keystone. And he's left a legacy, a long-lasting, forever legacy, not only to Keystone, but to everybody in the community who can enjoy those trails and building so much of the sugar shack and getting kids outdoors.
When we came, Keystone was a family. Tom and Sandy Cupoleri, Mike Mole, and Pat. We did everything together. We went to athletic events. We went to the art programs.
Worked together. We would do outside projects together. We did target shooting together. Yeah, I miss him.
1985 was a momentous year for Keystone. After 117 years, the college would inaugurate its first female president, Margaretta Beelan Chamberlain.
Women have always had leadership positions at Keystone. Several board members going back to Margaretta in the 60s and 70s who went on to become board chairs. And of course, Margaretta went on to be president of the college, not just chairman of the board.
She was a leader in the community. So when she agreed to take over the college and run it as kind of an interim president, that was kind of a lifesaver for the college when that happened.
It was under her leadership that we built the new gym. She said we needed it. We had all known that for a long time, but we just didn't take the step forward. And Margaretta said, we're going to take that step forward.
In 1995, Dr. Edward Beam Jr. was hired as the college's 9th president. He arrived with his wife, Regina, to find Keystone in deep financial trouble. The future of the college was in serious doubt, and wrenching decisions would have to be made in order to preserve it.
Ned Beam was Keystone's best cheerleader. When he came, Keystone was going through some rough times.
So here we were on this late Friday afternoon in the middle of a snowstorm, and it was shortly after he arrived, and I said, Ned, how are you doing? And he said, well, it's harder than I thought it was going to be, but there's more hope here than I've ever seen.
I think that we originally didn't realize that Keystone was really in such bad shape until you really got deep into the books and really looked at things. But Ned's idea was that we had to put Keystone on the map.
And under his leadership, it rebounded, and so he really sparked a renaissance at Keystone, so to speak. And he just never missed an opportunity to promote Keystone.
Ned was a pin guy. He loved pins. A Keystone pin for your lapel. And he made sure anybody that came to campus, if they didn't have a pin, he would put a Keystone pin on them.
We knew that we needed to find a leader who was, first of all, very much in contact with the community, who showed that he was interested in Scranton and Tunkhannock and all, the whole area, that was interested in students, that brought a bright and shiny future to the college. And he was all of those things, Ned Beam.
My husband, you mentioned this earlier, my husband is a pilot, and he had a little four-seater, a Grumman Cheetah with a retractable top.
And a few times he was able to fly Ned to a meeting in Harrisburg in his small plane. And we put I think on his tail, and called it Keystone 1.
Keystone 1 coming in for a landing, Keystone 1. So it was just so much fun. And it would be the same thing. I mean, he would land in Harrisburg and the people would always ask about the plane, Keystone 1. So I'm sure they felt that Keystone was a much bigger, thriving university, because it had its own airplane.
Enrollment was down and they figured, well, if we went from a 2-year program to a 4-year program, we could keep all of those students that were in the 2-year program and add just as many to it. So we could double our enrollment just by going to 4 years.
We had more and more students who kept telling us, we want to stay here for 4 years. It's terrible that we have to leave after 2 years.
It was Dr. Beam who realized, because of that enrollment problem, that it was time for us to go for 4-year. And so it took a few years for us to make that happen. We went 4-year in 1998, I believe. But that was the thing that saved us in terms of enrollment of, we're not going to be a junior college anymore because private junior colleges are going away. So we went baccalaureate. And then as soon as we could, we got permission from Middle States and the Department of Education to also offer master's degrees.
But all in all, change is not easy. But if you don't change, consider the alternatives.
After 18 years as president, Ned Beam retired in 2013, and Dr. David Coppola arrived as Keystone's 10th president.
I think Ned staying for that full year and giving his stamp of approval on David was what that community needed. He was a beloved president, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what would happen to the college with someone new.
When I found out that David Coppola had a background in music education, the president of Keystone, I started thinking how exciting it would be to build a music program. So I reached out via email to David Coppola, basically with, if you want a band, I'll build it. And it was probably a little bit presumptuous of me, but I got an interview.
Talking about that spirit, that spirit that music has brought to this college campus. For Relay for Life, we'll have a band up there around homecoming. You saw that. I mean, it gives that vibrancy and spirit that I want to see continue.
The current era of Keystone began in 2018. With the departure of President Coppola, the college's provost, Dr. Tracy Brundage, was hired as Keystone's 11th president.
She was our provost for a year, so she was able to see what our challenges were, see what our strengths were, and able to build upon that. So even though we still have our challenges, we have consistent leadership at the helm.
There was one other female president when the institution was a 2-year school for a couple years. But to my knowledge, I'm the first female president since we've been a 4-year institution. So only the second female president of Keystone in 150 years. So it's pretty significant.
I think the biggest change that I've really seen here at Keystone is actually having Dr. Brundage come in as our new president. And it's been really exciting to actually watch a female president in Keystone College in this position. And she's just very inspirational. She's very kind, very gracious.
I've been involved in higher education for the past 21 years. I've been involved in workforce and economic development. I've worked in the private sector. I've taught. I'm very passionate about higher education, and I want to be able to make a difference in the lives of our students.
I think Dr. Brundage brings a lot of experience and interest in workforce development and rewarding careers for our students. So I think that is a way that it's going to change, and it should change. I think that she has very clear focus for partnerships within the community, for relationships with business that are going to result in good job placements for our students. So yes, I think that the shift has changed, and I think it's good for us and good for the community.
I think it's key, though, to remember that colleges will continue to adapt for the next 100 years. And just because they're small doesn't mean they're fragile. In fact, just the opposite. There's a special kind of relationship and interaction that happens, small class sizes, knowing your professors personally and individually. And so as a result, you have to keep evolving. And so I think it's important to note that, only because I anticipate Keystone will keep on evolving.
The people you meet here, everybody has a story. I think it's important to take the time to hear people's stories of Keystone, which is what I think we're doing here today. I think that's why we're here to celebrate 150 years. And whether the times are always wonderful or often challenging, I think that's what we need to realize. How important is Keystone? How are we going to make certain to carry on the next 50 years, the next 100 years? By working together and remember the stories. I think that's going to get us through anything.